So something really creepy happened to me yesterday. I'm still processing it because, God. But a bit of context, I live in Ireland. Pretty peaceful country, recently moved from Galway to Dublin. Moved to North Dublin, which is the rougher part, but it's still not too bad. I live with my family outside the city, could be considered the countryside. The area is pretty rural, it's just houses and farms pretty much with no shops or stations nearby. Mind you, there are a lot of houses around, but we're all distant as we have big gardens. There are no sidewalks and the road is pretty narrow and worn out, and it's rare to see cars, so it's fine to just kind of go on the road. I went on my daily 2K run, which I usually do at around 6 p.m. However, yesterday I had some studying to do and didn't head out until around 9 p.m. when it was quite dark outside. Now let me describe the experience. Imagine on the left there was a house with lights on, and on the right you'd see a field or a farm. Then there was an abandoned building right next to it, followed by an area of trees for about 200 meters or so. This pretty much sums up the entire road. It wasn't completely abandoned, but it was creepy enough to give me chills at night. Anyways, I usually listen to music on my run with the volume all the way up, so I can't really hear anything around me. So as I reached the area with the patch of trees, it was pitch black and the lights didn't work properly. Occasionally they would turn on and then flicker back off. Therefore, I had to use a flashlight to navigate. While a song from West Side Story was blasting in my headphones, I suddenly noticed the lights flickering back on, which was a relief. However, that's when I saw it. A figure standing about 30 meters away, roughly 20 meters from the road amidst the trees. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but no. The figure was there, completely still, not moving at all. It sent shivers down my spine, so I kept running. I turned down the volume of my music just in case to be able to hear any movement from the figure in case I needed to make a run for it. I increased my speed and passed by the figure, all while still trying to keep my music low. After I had distanced myself by about 100 meters, I turned up the music and tried to process what had happened. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me because of the darkness. At this point, I was far away, but I knew that I'd have to return home, and I usually walked back the distance I ran, so I'd have to pass that spot again. This time, the lights were flickering, but they mostly stayed on. I tried to keep an eye on the spot where I had seen the figure, but now there was nothing there. Nothingness, and I was still creeped out. I turned off my music and started to run past that spot quickly because I was scared. Suddenly, a man jumped across the street right in front of me, and it looked like the same figure. I came to a halt for a second, shocked, and then he started moving. I turned around and began running as fast as I could. As I did, he started screaming for help, literally screaming at the top of his lungs while running after me. Eventually, I passed the trees and reached the area with the houses. Someone heard me screaming and came out, asking if everything was okay. I stopped running and realized that the guy was now gone. I explained everything to the person who came to help me. At that point, I was extremely creeped out and scared. I still had to get back home though, but my parents weren't there. They had gone to their friend's house, leaving me home alone. I asked the stranger for a lift because I was not going back to that area again. Thankfully, the stranger turned out to be helpful and kindly escorted me home. I locked all the doors and checked everything to make sure that I was safe. Shortly after, my parents arrived, but I didn't tell them anything because I didn't want them to worry. I haven't gone out for a run today because I'm genuinely scared. I'm terrified just thinking about what could have happened if I had been too tired to run and he had caught me. I'll update you guys if anything else happens, although I hope nothing else does. Maureen Anu Kelly was born on September 26 of 1993 and was raised by a single mother named Mapuana in Spokane, Washington. Following her graduation from Lewis and Clark High School, she listed her occupation on Facebook as guru at spreading the love, but told friends she aspired to become a singer-songwriter. Owing to her heritage as a Pacific Islander, Maureen's instrument of choice was the ukulele, and she often posted videos of intimate bedroom performances on the video streaming site YouTube. Maureen's half-sister, Cherry Kapu, later described her as a very laid-back, carefree girl, and mentioned how in June of 2013, 19-year-old Maureen had called her to request a favor. She called me before she left, saying she was going camping with friends and asked if she could borrow some of my camping gear, Sherry said. She was excited about going and told me she loved me. And that was totally normal for her. She was a very affectionate person. The next day, Maureen stopped by Sherry's apartment to collect the camping gear. When Sherry asked where she was headed, Maureen replied that she and her friends planned to visit the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. The reply surprised Sherry. Maureen was very much an admirer of Mother Nature, but she was not an experienced camper. She had previously expressed a desire to spend a prolonged period living outdoors, but had never been suited to the realities of wilderness living. I asked her, why now? Sherry later said, and Maureen told me that she wanted to go on a spiritual quest, and that really concerned me. As she departed, Sherry waved Maureen off after wishing her the very best of luck, but little did she know, it was the last time they'd ever see each other. Located around 3 hours' drive southeast of Seattle, the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest extends more than 70 miles along the western slopes of the Cascade Mountain Range, from Mount Rainier in the west to the Columbia River in the east. The forest consists of broad, old-growth woodland and high mountain meadows, along with several glaciers and numerous volcanic peaks. The forest also features the Canyon Creek Campground, a small, lightly used camp tucked in the forest adjacent to the eponymous body of water. 8 campsites are available for tent camping only and come complete with a small dining table and a fire ring for warmth and cooking. To get there, Maureen and her friends drove out to Chalachi near Highway 503 on June 9th of 2013. From there, they traveled east on Road 54, then turned down a series of small back roads until they reached Canyon Creek. They found the campsite, along with the trail that led to it, completely unmaintained, but Maureen's companions were experienced campers and set about making the area much more comfortable for themselves. The group set about clearing away all the fallen pine needles from the camp stove and table, then, after setting up their tents for the evening, they enjoyed a small campfire dinner. Yet following their meal, the group noticed that Maureen's behavior took a turn for the bizarre. Her fellow campers were well aware of her desire to embark on some kind of spiritual journey, but had no idea what that entailed. So when Maureen approached her tent and began to strip, completely naked, her companions were nothing short of flabbergasted. By the time she was ready to begin her spiritual journey, Maureen was barefoot and wearing nothing but a small fanny pack containing a knife, some matches, and a compass. Her friends advised her against heading out into the woods in such a state of undress, but the 19-year-old insisted. She reassured her companions that she wouldn't walk too far and would be back by midnight at the very least, as well as insisting that her state of undress was essential to the completion of the aforementioned journey. And so, with trepidation, Maureen's friends watched her disappear among the trees, and never to be seen again. When midnight came and went, and Maureen failed to reappear, her friends began to panic. They fanned out into the darkness of the woods, flashlights in hand, and called out to their missing companion, but there was no reply to be heard. Unable to rest while Maureen remained unaccounted for, her friends contacted the local sheriff's department to report her missing. Around an hour later, the first deputies arrived at the campground to begin their investigation. Skamania County Under-Sheriff Dave Cox later recalled this interaction with unease. Maureen's friends told us that she talked about doing this spiritual quest thing for quite some time, he said. Apparently, she felt it was something she needed to do. Cox said his deputies told the teenagers to be brutally honest with them before asking if Maureen had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of her disappearance. Each vehemently denied any kind of drug or alcohol use, and according to Dave Cox, Their position seemed more than plausible. They could have quite easily tidied up the campsite prior to the deputies' appearance, but upon their arrival, the teenagers seemed alert and focused, with deputies observing no evidence of drug or alcohol consumption at the campsite. Within just a few short hours, Under Sheriff Cox was helping orchestrate one of the largest search and rescue efforts Skamania County had ever seen. But right away, the prognosis was grim. The area that Maureen had ventured into, almost completely nude, with nightfall rapidly approaching, is one of the steepest and most hazardous in the entire region. Sharon Ward, a representative of the Pacific Crest Search Dogs Association, personally participated in the search and rescue effort. The area Maureen walked off into is amazingly steep. It's called Canyon Creek for a reason, Sharon said. How she got down there is a mystery, but then climbing up again in her bare feet, that had to be tough going. It's a remote area, lots of timber and brush, so her feet would have been cut up by the time she made it up to the other side. And she did make it up there, we're in no doubt of that. A total of 75 professional and volunteer rescue workers combed the woods around Canyon Creek for 5 whole days. They did so in shifts, employing a multitude of search and rescue techniques over an area of 4 square miles. But by far the most effective asset at their disposal was the team of dedicated tracker dogs. After honing in on Maureen's scent, the dogs traversed the entirety of Canyon Creek, then headed north into the woods towards a pathway known as Forest Road number 54. Expert trackers followed close behind and quickly detected a series of human footprints in the soft dirt. Investigators were in no doubt that these belonged to Maureen, but after following them north towards the service road, the footprints suddenly and inexplicably disappeared. Investigators then looked to the tracker dogs to continue marking out the trail, but they simply wandered among the trees for a while before returning to follow the scent trail in reverse. For those present, it must have made for an extremely chilling moment. For all intent and purpose, they were standing in the place where Maureen Kelly had simply ceased to exist. It was a truly baffling turn of events, but the search teams followed standard operating procedure and spent the next 4 days using Maureen's last known location as the focal point for their operation. Rescue workers combed the area around road number 54, carefully searching for any new tracks or scent trails, but as the days went by, the weather grew worse and worse. Thick cloud cover prevented helicopter teams from circling the area, while heavy rain impeded the ground team's ability to conduct a proper search. A person could literally walk right on top of somebody and never know it, one volunteer later said. Then if they were rolled over a log or something, forget about it. We'd have to dig up the whole forest to find them. By June 15th, just less than a week after she'd initially disappeared, Maureen's loved ones began to consider the possibility that the search teams were no longer looking for a live person. Despite the weather on the day of her disappearance being relatively mild, nighttime temperatures would have quite possibly dipped into the 40s. Then, coupled with some light rain, Maureen could have found herself developing hypothermia at an alarming and unexpected rate. This theory became increasingly popular following the rescue effort's conclusion, which came at 6 p.m. on June 15th of 2013. Skamania County Sheriff personally promised Maureen's mother that the investigation would continue and that no matter how tragic her daughter's end, her remains would be brought home. Professionals and volunteers alike continued the search area surrounding Service Road 54, albeit on a much slower and ad hoc basis. But as the months went by, something very chilling became evident. Given that the prevailing theory was that Maureen had fallen victim to the elements, it stood reason that it was only a matter of time before her body, or what remained of it, was recovered. Yet time after time, both professional and amateur search teams headed out into the woods and came back empty-handed. Some posited that Maureen's remains had been set upon by hungry scavengers, and that they could now be spread out over a much wider area. But if that were the case, surely one of the many search and rescue teams would have reported such a discovery. Not even an animal bone was isolated and analyzed as possibly belonging to Maureen, which leads us to believe that her fate may well have been very different from those suggested by search and rescue experts. Last June marked the 10-year anniversary of Maureen's mysterious disappearance, and as frustrating as it is, an entire decade has brought us no closer to understanding what truly happened to her. Yet perhaps the best insight into her ultimate fate can be found in a Facebook status that she posted on June 6th of 2013, just 3 days before she wandered off into the woods with not a stitch of clothing on her. "Happiness," she wrote, "is something that cannot be found."
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Just to give some context, I'm currently in the UK, and the town where I live in is known for its drug scene, but doesn't have a violent crime problem to speak of. I think that's why I found what happened so shocking, because I lived in London before, and while some messed up stuff did happen to me there, it was nowhere near the level of what happened to me earlier this year. My partner and I live together in our flat, which is in a relatively busy residential area. I work from home, however, and he's out of the flat quite a lot, so I guess it might look to an outside observer like I live alone. Our flat complex was once an old factory, and we have these huge industrial windows, so people walking on the street have a pretty clear view of our dining room, which is where I work during the day. It all started in July of this year. I'm ashamed to say that I can be a major rubbernecker, and a lot of drama occurs on the road outside of our flat, so I look out of the windows often during my workday for some light entertainment. The best was a 2-hour breakup I got to watch unfold in the car just below our window, but that's besides the point. One day, I got up to make myself a cup of tea, looked out of the kitchen window, and saw this guy just staring at me. I was struck by how intense it was and how he didn't look away, even when it was obvious that I was looking back at him. I felt creeped out by it, and I tried not to let it bother me. We have a lot of drug addicts and other weird characters that hang out around here, so it didn't seem like such a big deal. I went back to work, and by the time I'd sat down at the table, he was gone. About a week later, my partner had gone to visit his dad for the weekend, so I was excited to hunker down and catch up on some of my favorite shows alone. After about 30 minutes, the buzzer to the flat went. The buzzer is so loud and it scared the heck out of me. I was lucky my popcorn didn't go flying out of my hands. Now, our flat complex has this big porch where teenagers and addicts love to hang out because it provides shelter from the rain, and about 4 people can sit down inside of it. Sometimes people lean up on the buzzers by accident when they're hanging out in the porch, so I assumed that was what happened. After a few seconds, however, the buzzer went again, and again, and again. Someone was pressing it in this rhythmic pattern. It's something I know my partner does when he's forgotten his keys, and it's kind of our code for me to let him in, which is why I found it so disconcerting. At first, I was worried he might have missed the bus to his dad's house and had decided to come back to the flat. I was nearly about to buzz him straight in when I thought it would be a good idea to pick up the phone first and check who it was. As soon as I picked up the phone, the person standing near the intercom must have heard, because they said, "Hello?" It was definitely not my partner. I asked who it was and why they were buzzing the flat so late at night, but all they said was, "Can you let me in?" I asked them why they wanted to come in, and they said, "You invited me, remember?" While they were talking, they kept kind of laughing under their breath, and the whole exchange put me on edge. I told them I had no idea who they were and just hung up. I was expecting them to start pressing the buzzer again, but they didn't. After a few minutes, I crept out of the flat to have a look at who was on the porch, but they were gone. My partner has to get up early for work, whereas I'm more of a night owl. Most nights, I'm up until about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. working on my laptop while he's asleep. A few nights after the intercom incident, I was on my laptop watching YouTube videos and realized that we'd forgotten to take the trash out. This happens a lot, and it's not uncommon for me to take the trash out at around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. At least it wasn't until all this happened. I put my slippers on, grabbed the bag of trash, and took it out to the curb outside the flat's main entrance. When I looked across the street, there was this guy standing on the opposite street corner. He was watching me, and his eyes followed me all the way from the front door to the curb. I noticed he was smoking, so I assumed he lived in one of the houses across the street. I remember even thinking, wouldn't it be creepy if he tried to come over here? As I put the trash bag down, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw him walking in a straight line across the road towards me, with his eyes fixed on me the entire time. I don't know how to describe it, but the look on his face filled me with this instinctive sense of dread. It felt like someone had just turned my stomach inside out. I pulled my keys out of my hoodie pocket, turned around, and ran to the front door. I've never felt that kind of fear before, and it was like my body was compelling me to get as far away from this man as possible. I got into the building, slammed the door behind me, and rushed to my flat without looking back. I didn't want to know whether he followed me or not. I told my partner about the whole thing the next day and how shook up I was. We agreed that we'd be more proactive with trash, and I've never taken it out late at night again. Fast forward to the beginning of August, about 2 weeks after the trash incident, and I'd pretty much forgotten all about it. I was still too scared to go out late at night on the road, but nothing weird had happened since then. I went to bed at about 2 a.m., but I felt restless for some reason and struggled to get to sleep. By about 3 a.m., I was contemplating whether or not to give up and go do something else when I heard this scream. The sound cut right through me. There was something visceral about the terror in that scream. I knew it was bad because my partner went from stone cold asleep to being up in a shot. He asked me what it was, and I said I didn't know. I went to the window straight away and looked out. Down one of the side roads near our flat, I could see headlights, but I couldn't get a clear view of the car. The screaming continued in bursts, and after a while, I could make out words. It was a woman, and she was saying something like, get out," over and over again. I'm used to hearing all kinds of domestic arguments take place on the road outside of our flat, particularly since we're near the university and several popular bars. But this is different. There was this raw fear in her voice that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned to my partner and said I had to call the police. When they picked up and I explained what was happening, they seemed disinterested at first, but the operator's tone changed when I told them where it was. I think they must have been getting calls from all around the area about it. It was sometime during this phone call that I heard a screech of tires and the screaming stopped. The operator asked me to go to the window and describe to them what was happening. When I looked down, there was this black car sat on the road. One of the neighbors from across the road was speaking to the two guys in the car. I had to twist to get a good look at them, but one of the guys in the car looked uncannily like the guy who had been watching me when I was putting out the trash that time. At first, the conversation seemed congenial, but it took a turn when the neighbor asked them some sort of question that I couldn't quite hear clearly, and they sped off down the road. With no less than 10 minutes, 3 police cars arrived and had blocked off the roads leading to our flat. Our residential area is on a grid system. They were knocking on doors and asking to speak to all of our neighbors. I told my partner that we should go out and speak to them, and since we saw a lot of what happened and my partner had had the foresight to write down the license plate of the black car. When we went out, there were these 2 girls talking to one of the police officers. They were both shaking, and one of them looked as though they had been crying. I decided to stand nearby and wait for the girls to finish before speaking with the officer myself. What they said made my blood run cold. They were from one of the houses that looked out directly onto the road where I had seen the headlights, so they had a clear view of what had happened. Like us, they had been alerted by the screaming and gone straight to the window. From what they could gather, the black car had cut off a small red car on the road. It pulled right in front of it, and that's what had caused the girl driving the red car to scream the first time. They thought it might have been some kind of misunderstanding, but then they watched as one of the guys from the black car got out, walked to the red car, and jumped in through the window. That's the point when the girl must have been screaming, get out, get out. There had been a struggle, and the girl watching said they assumed the guy was just trying to steal the car, but then he forced the driver into the back seat, and that's when he drove off. The 2 girls were both hysterical by this point, and you could tell they felt guilty for not intervening. I could feel that same guilt seeping into my thoughts as well. After the guy had driven off in the red car, the two men in the black car had gone the opposite way and turned the corner onto our road, but had been stopped by another neighbor. Although this neighbor had been alerted by the screaming, he hadn't actually witnessed what happened, so he had stopped the black car to ask the guy what was going on without knowing they were involved, and that was the exchange we saw. When the guy started acting suspicious, he asked him if they would wait for the police to arrive, and that's the point when they took off. It wasn't until we got back to the flat that I started to put two and two together. I have a small red car, just like the one that the girls had described, and I normally come back at night on that day of the week since it's the day I go to visit my parents. I had only come back early on this particular occasion because I needed to let a plumber in to do some work on the flat. What if they had been waiting for me, and they had gotten the wrong car? Over the next few days, I contacted the police several times and checked the local news, but I never heard anything about the girl who was kidnapped. I still have no idea what happened to her, and all I know is that they found her car abandoned somewhere not far from where she was taken, but she wasn't in it. It still gives me chills just thinking about it.
My worst nightmare. As a child, I despised attending any ceremony, particularly weddings. Every time I went, all I witnessed was chaos and disorder, and it always left me feeling drained and frustrated. I was introduced to the world of weddings at the age of 9 when I attended my uncle's ceremony. The joyous atmosphere was dampened by a woman who had too much to drink and threw up beside me, leaving me feeling unwell. The next wedding I attended was for some distant relative when I was 13. It was a chaotic affair, with unruly children running around, smearing wedding cake and food all over each other. As a teenager, I attended my third wedding at the age of 16. However, the occasion did not go as planned, as the groom arrived extremely late, causing the wedding to be canceled. This unfortunate turn of events sparked an intense fight between the two families, resulting in a chaotic and unpleasant experience for everyone involved. Eventually, I stopped attending them altogether. However, I couldn't avoid going to my best friend and distant cousin Juliana's wedding, which took place 2 days ago. It was the day of her wedding, and for some inexplicable reason, she chose to call me at the crack of dawn. 3 things I despise the most: weddings, my food getting stolen, and someone disturbing my peaceful slumber. I love sleep, so I dismissed the call at least 5 times. However, when she persisted, I answered the phone in a daze. "What do you want?" I grumbled, still half asleep. "Danny, you need to be at home in 10 minutes, she said, before abruptly hanging up the phone. I put the phone down and tried to go back to sleep without giving her request a second thought. But 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. "What do you want now?" I screamed, feeling increasingly frustrated. "Stop sleeping and hurry up and get here," she roared. I got up, exasperated, and began rubbing my eyes while yawning. The only thing on my mind was sleep, and I couldn't help but wonder why people bother getting married. Even though it was her special day, it felt like I was being punished. After deciding to head to her house, I went to the bathroom to freshen up. I took my time, deliberately savoring the feeling of the warm water running over my skin, as I cleaned up and got ready. Once I was done, I finally set out for her place. Despite her repeated phone calls, I chose not to answer as I drove, relishing the small act of defiance. She was likely wondering if I had fallen asleep again, but I didn't care. As soon as my car pulled up, I saw her dart out of the front door of her house. Before I could even step out of the vehicle, she hastily approached me and thrust a small box into my hands, urging me to deliver it to her fiancé. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance as I asked her if that was the only reason she had called me over. She responded in the affirmative, explaining that her fiancé needed to wear the box's contents with his suit. With a dismissive wave, she instructed me to hurry up and get going. I shot her a frustrated glance before starting the engine and driving towards her fiancé's house. I picked up the phone with a deep sigh and saw her name flashing on my screen again, my patience already thinning. "What is it now?" I asked Juliana, my annoyance turning into anger as I struggled to keep composure. "His passcode is 9780. He must be sleeping, so just put it beside his bed and you're free to leave," she said briskly, businesslike. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation at her dismissive tone. "Are you sure you don't want me to give him a nice bath and dress him up too?" I said, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Shut up and do as I said," she snapped, her impatience palpable, before abruptly ending the call. I was left standing there feeling frustrated and resentful, wondering why I had agreed to help Juliana in the first place. After traveling for around 20 minutes, I finally arrived at Paul's house. Upon entering, I was surprised to find the place in disarray, indicating that they had partied hard the previous night. Knowing the way to his bedroom, I made my way there, but I heard strange and unsettling moaning sounds emanating from the room as I approached. Despite my growing apprehension, I pushed forward and peered inside, only to be met with a shocking and unexpected sight. The bastard was cheating on Juliana, and my first instinct was to capture the moment on camera. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal towards him, and I knew that Juliana deserved to see the truth before it was too late. So I quickly sent her the photo before entering the room. "What do we have here such early in the morning?" As their eyes landed on me after hearing my voice, they immediately tried to hide themselves under the sheet. Dan, it's nothing. She is just a stripper." Paul started stuttering when I caught them and tried to explain how it happened. He even said he was drunk, which was only making me laugh. Drunk people don't have sex first thing in the morning on their wedding day. My phone began ringing once again, and a broad smile spread across my face as I saw my cousin's name on the screen. I showed it to him before answering the call. "What's the meaning of this photo, Dan?" her angry voice demanded. "There is no meaning behind it, Julie. I'm standing at the scene right now." As I told her that, Paul's cheater face turned pale as he realized his wedding was about to be called off. "Hold them right there and don't let them escape," she commanded, before disconnecting the call. I accepted her order and stood at the door, preventing their exit. He tried to make multiple excuses, saying it wasn't his fault and that the stripper seduced him. Then he resorted to begging, followed by threats as he attempted to escape. But I am not a judo trainer for nothing. About half an hour later, Juliana entered with the entire family. She probably would have called his parents too, because they entered shortly after, and they all saw what shameful act he had committed before humiliating him as she threw the ring on his face while calling off the wedding. My work there was done, so I headed home for my sleep, leaving them to their drama. I think she knew he was cheating. That must be why she called me so early in the morning. I don't know what the reason was. One thing is for sure, it doesn't matter if it's my sister or brother. I am never attending another wedding again.
The case of Kalicia Williams. The world of social media has brought a lot on the table for kids. With so many things already to compete about, social media have become a thing to look out for. Social media is exposing their lives to everything that is not very safe when it comes to their safety and everything, and their lives are just too exposed to the outside threats of reality. In this video, you see a young girl making TikTok one of the social media platforms, and she will be interrupted by someone, an intruder, and that is when all hell broke loose. Now, this raises a question as to how controlled the exposure to these sites should be, and how involved the parent should be to the dangers of outside world. TikTok is the parody of the world, and it is not the very safe creative place as it charades. Young people exposing their lives, location out in the open, does not shelter them or actually prepare them from the real dangers that are in their way. A 16-year-old Kalicia Williams, a model student and a loving daughter, met with a similar deadly fate. While filming a TikTok that turned out to become the very last TikTok that she ever filmed. The pandemic was a big setback for a lot of students her age, and so is it for her. The less amount of socializing and the long exposure to social media was definitely one of the downhill for a lot of teens. She was quite active on TikTok and had an influential amount of followers there, but the events that led to that night are limited to Kalicia and the person who murdered her. But there is more than just a murder here to blame. So there was this Airbnb thing that one of her friend's mothers was supposed to be chaperoning, so there was nothing to worry about. And since it had been done, her father wasn't really worried about it. So he said, "It will be good for you, getting out, being social. Pandemic has been rough to social lives." To which she replied, "As long as I have Netflix, it's okay." But then she left for the Airbnb, and the next call Kalicia's parent got was horrifying, and the news of Kalicia's death forever broke them. Turns out, Kalicia never was at the Airbnb, and even after the friend's mother confirmation, Kalicia never went to the Airbnb. Instead, they went to a hotel room in Hyatt Regency, and that was the last place that she was seen. What happened? Well, she was in the Hyatt Regency and busy making TikTok, when in between the TikTok, she was startled with an intruder in her room, and she reached to her phone to stop what she was doing. And it was the last time we saw of Kalicia. She was shot in the hotel. It was one of the boys she knows that shot her. He probably came in and confronted her about something nobody really knows, but I guess we can assume at this point he was charged with aggravated assault. The boy must have tried to have his way in some or the other way, and that is when he shot him, and she died. Nobody knows whatever the conversation was, but it was something that led to the devastating fate of Kalicia Williams. There were many blames to be passed around, and one was to the chaperone, who made sure that they will be safe.